Hey everyone, this is Luke with Silver Lake Bison Farm, and I'm excited to share with you a little bit about the history of the bison. Let's dig into a little bit about this animal and how it became really an American icon, and most recently in 2016, the national mammal of the United States. They have an absolute incredible history. They're an amazing animal. They're majestic. I know I'm a little obsessed with them, but I'm telling you, there's such a story behind this animal in America, and it really represents our country in so many different ways. So let's dig into a little bit of the history of the bison, the resilience of this animal. You know, over the past 150 years, they have been rife with tragedy and devastation and went down to almost extinction. And yet now there's hundreds of thousands of them here in America, and the animal is making an incredible comeback. And I'd love to share with you a little bit about, as I've dug in and researched this animal, some things that you might not know and how much more you'll appreciate the animal, the bison, as you better understand their history, and honestly ways that you can leverage their resilience. You know, as a father and as a mother in your family, you can reference this animal when you're reading books and you're talking about this animal with your kids. That's how I started to love the animal, the bison. So let's dig into a little bit about the American bison and its history. So one of the first things you need to know about bison is they are native to North America. You know, they have been here for a long time. This is not like we brought them over. They're native to this area in this country. Not only that, you can find bison all the way up in Alaska and Canada, into North Dakota, and all the way down to Texas. So this animal can thrive and live in some incredibly different environments. They're a very resilient animal, meaning they can handle a lot, whether it's big storms, hot weather, you name it. They can continue to battle the elements and survive and thrive. So they're native here to North America. That's an important point first where we want to start. In fact, it was believed that there was roughly 30 million to even 60 million bison in herds roaming North America, you know, previously, before we'll get into what eventually started to lead to the endangerment and potential extinction that, thank goodness, didn't happen, of this animal. But think about that. Hundreds of thousands of these majestic animals roaming the plains and roaming the earth. And it's just a crazy, amazing thing to think about. And a lot of people think, well, how is that possible? How is there this many animals around? You know, the bison are actually essential to the ecosystem in which they live in. You know, they are actually very important as they stampede and eat through areas. Their hooves and what they're doing is actually digging the seeds and digging things into the ground. So I won't get into the details of that, but what you need to know is this animal was actually and is still essential to our natural ecosystem. So don't think that just because there was 30 million or 60 million or whatever it was of these bison running around, you know, it was meant to be there. It was supposed to be that way. These animals were part of the natural ecosystem in which things operate. Around 150 to 200 years ago or so, their numbers started to plummet, and this was really due to broadly two different reasons. One was for many years overhunting had been occurring, and we'll dig into a little bit more of that, though. It was a little bit more than just overhunting. And then second, there was disease, episodic disease, and I apologize if I'm jacking up that name. It's also referred to as Texas tick disease. But this disease came in that the bison had not experienced before, and we'll dig in a little bit about that disease as well. So let's dig into the overhunting part, that first area of what led to the bison having so few here in America. So as we moved west, when we were establishing what we now know as the United States of America, as the pioneers and everyone was moving west, referred to as manifest destiny in some of our history textbooks, they were moving west. Well, as part of that, the bison started to be hunted a lot more, but there was more to just even being hunted. Unfortunately, some of the animals were really just being slaughtered for their hides and their fur, and it would be shipped to New York City. So there's reports of hundreds of thousands of bison being slaughtered and really just taking their fur, and then they would ship it to the city for people to use instead of really just using it for the meat. So that's one component of it. Another component, and this is something that really gets into a controversial topic, was the United States military was also, moving west and operating during this time. And there's been reports out there saying that the military actually encouraged the killing of this bison. See, at that time, they were fighting with the Native Americans as they were moving west. And so obviously the Native Americans really leaned on the bison for not only food, but also clothing and many other things. So from a military tactical strategy standpoint, the U.S. military would encourage the getting rid of bison, because what it would do would make it harder for the Native Americans at the time to be able to survive, because at the time they wanted to move them onto reservations. And so that is another component, of it. But even more, the railroad was coming west at that time. And so these, like I said before, there was hundreds of thousands of these animals, and the railroad industry even was frustrated with the massive herds that would come through and destroy the work that they'd be doing on the railroad. So they were also encouraging really the slaughter and removal of the bison. And so there was a lot of things when we talk about overhunting that comes into play when we refer to that, as more and more people were moving west, and we had these different dynamics going on, and this military involvement and also hunting involvement with this bison as people started to learn what they were. Okay, so there was a second thing that really started to lead to the decline of these animals, which was disease. So episodic disease is what was infiltrating the bison herds, and really where this came from was cattle. So as the cattle moved north from Texas and continued to grow, and people moved west and the cattle started to expand, bison were exposed to this disease that they were not familiar with. So obviously when a new disease comes or something like that that you haven't seen before and haven't built immunity to, whether you're an animal or a person, I think we're pretty familiar with this, that it starts to spread. Okay, so the bison started to get this episodic disease, also referred to as tick fever, in cattle, and the cattle would share that with the bison as they would interact and touch each other, and they would get this disease, and the fatality rate was very, very high with this. So it's reported that there's an 84% fatality rate with tick fever disease. So it was wiping out, thousands and hundreds of thousands of bison at the time with this tick fever disease as it was spreading across the herds. So when you combine this overhunting and this kind of encouraging of removal of animals due to people moving west, combined with disease that was rampant running across the animals, you can obviously see how in a short amount of time, this animal went from hundreds of thousands of millions across the plains to much, much, much smaller. And let's dig into how small it got and what led to the bison previously being, close to extinction and an endangered animal. In 1889, it was reported that there was approximately 1,000 or less bison across North America. Isn't that amazing to think how few bison? Less than 1,000 in 1889. In fact, Yellowstone, which is a famous herd that we all hear about, they said had around 22 bison in around 1901 time frame. So in the very early 1900s, we're looking at 22 bison. Now that herd is roughly around 4,500-ish, but only 22 at the time. And so obviously we are getting down to very, very few bison that are roaming around the plains of North America. And so in comes really someone that many of us have heard about, and that's Teddy Roosevelt, Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy for short, and he eventually becomes the president of the United States. But in comes Teddy, and what he does is he has a farm in North Dakota, and he sees the decline of this amazing, majestic animal, and he decides that he, and along with several others that were with him, wanted to do something about it. And so they started a lot of different things that helped with the comeback of this animal. One of them being the Boone and Crockett Club and the conservation movement of the 20th century that we often hear about when it comes to some of the national parks, and really an emphasis in conserving not only the animal, the bison, which was really a big part of it, but also some national treasures here in our country. So Teddy Roosevelt comes in and says, hey, let's do something about this before this animal, is wiped out from the history of our country when it's native, again, like I said, to this area, and there was millions of them previously roaming around. So Teddy, along with many others at the time, joined forces, and they say, we're going to do something about this. By 1929 or so, it was believed that there was now about 17,000 bison. So we went from under 1,000 in the early 1900s to fast forward a few decades, and now they got it up to 17,000. And this was really due to all the efforts of Teddy Roosevelt and those that supported this conservation movement to get this animal back away from endangerment and extinction. And they did a lot of different things to bring the animal back. Today, bison numbers are somewhere around 500,000 here in North America, and it's pretty amazing to see what it came from when we were down to under 1,000 bison there in the early 1900s to over 500,000 plus now during these times. And by 2025, the International Bison Association is hoping to reach 1 million bison is the goal in 2025. And obviously you can see the growth and the impact that they've had, and I'm excited to be a part of a very, very tiny part of helping them reach 1 million bison, where we're going to have some bison here on this farm and hopefully add to the numbers across the country and the globe, and the number of bison of this amazing, majestic animal that we get to learn from and watch grow. On May 9th, 2016, the National Bison Legacy Act was signed into law. And what this did was made the bison the national mammal of the United States of America. And this is pretty cool after what I talked about, telling you about the story of the bison, that now it joins the ranks of the eagle and it's our national mammal. And really why I think that's so neat is it's the story of the bison is a story of resilience. It's a story of America, right? As Americans, when we look at our history and the things that we've gone through and the wars that we've been in, the resilience that Americans have as we continue to fight for freedoms and the things that we most find and value here in America. And as a veteran of the war in Afghanistan, who has served and lost friends who have fought for freedom in this country, to me, it's a special animal because it represents this strong, resilient American personality and values that we want to represent. So I'm honored to get to, put these animals on my land and to teach my children about their history and be a part of that and the resilience of this animal, that not only did they come back from almost extinction, but now they're thriving and they're the national mammal of our country. It's a special animal. And not only that, I know I've shared with many of you this analogy of facing the storm. So that ties right in, right? When a storm is coming across the plains out west, or anywhere you might think of a big herd of bison roaming around, the bison don't run from it like cows. They choose to face it. They got that thick, heavy fur on the front, and they will face that storm head on, and they will charge right into the storm, getting through it faster instead of running away from it, because they're tough and they're a resilient animal. And this is what we want as values, as a person, as a father, as a husband, as I try to embody that. And I want that in my children. I want my children to be strong and resilient. I want them to value freedom. And I want them, when tough times come, to face those storms, just like that animal that's going to be in their backyard. So I hope you all learned something today about the animal, the bison, the history, the amazing resilience that this animal has had throughout the centuries, and why we should really appreciate this animal and honor this animal and really come to understand the value that it brings to our country, and how we can rally around it. Even during these times, during these tough times that we're facing as a country, we can rally around the American bison and say, let's be the bison. Let's embrace our inner bison. Let's be tough. Let's be resilient. It might be tough. It might be hard, but we're going to push back and fight back like the bison. Even if there's diseases coming, even if there's pandemics coming, even if there's storms coming, the bison face it. Let's do that as people. Let's do that as Americans. Let's face the storm. Embrace your inner bison. If you're enjoying these videos and love learning about the bison and want to watch our family of 7 start a bison farm with no experience, coming from the suburbs of Columbus, Ohio, then please hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and please comment what you would like to see in future videos as you follow us on this journey of putting in Silver Lake Bison Farm. Your support means so much to us. We appreciate you so much. Thank you.